with us, what does the Christian Reformed Church of North America have to say to the Dutch Reformed Church of South Africa about apartheid? Any ideas? Cool. It's not cool. So suddenly we're having this conversation. And we're having this conversation nested within a theological tradition where we can basically say, your scriptural justification for apartheid is heretical and you have to stop. And if you don't stop, we are going to break fellowship with you. Someone made the comment about, you know, there's a breaking fellowship comment in the Belgian Confession. Now, when you think about city life and you think about, well, we want to be open and welcoming to everyone. We don't want to break fellowship with anyone. You think, yeah, that's right. You want to welcome people. Well, what if you've got cousins in South Africa who are practicing apartheid?
Then you say, hey, we learned this like 10 years ago. Get over it.
Well,
that's what America said.
That's what America said. But what happens church-wise is you say, we're normally considered brothers, but you're doing something so egregious, we're going to break ties with you. Is that, well, I thought we were against breaking ties. Oh, sometimes we're against breaking ties. Sometimes we're for it, depending on the situation. That's not necessarily being inconsistent. It means being a human being that, well, let's say you're unhappy with your spouse one day. Well, maybe it'd be better to tell them in words why you're unhappy. Maybe you don't even know why you're unhappy, but you're going to be passive aggressive. They wake up in the morning and say, "Good morning, honey."
Breaking fellowship.
You're breaking fellowship. This is a dynamic that happens between human beings, and it also happens between communities. And it's a way in which communities try to sort themselves out. And it's a way that communities try to not kill each other, but hopefully have a conversation. Well, sometimes you start having a conversation, and conversations only get you so far, and then you realize, well, we can't talk about this for a little while. So you don't. But it festers because of the relationship. And so all of that stuff is built into these documents, because these documents represent hundreds of years of history working these things through. That's part of the reason, go ahead.
No, finish that.
Oh, that's part of the reason why sometimes you read things in these documents and you say, I don't like the sound of that. Oh yeah. You go to someone's house and you're a house guest and you realize that these two people aren't talking. And you say, well, I think that's wrong. I think they should talk. Yeah, they probably should. They might not be ready. And if you've been in that situation, you know, yeah, they're going to have this fight. They might not quite be ready to have this fight. So, and all that is part of maturity, where you say, okay, I'm going to back off and not be master of the universe for a moment and let other people start to work through their stuff. This gets more complicated because a lot of these documents are hundreds of years old, and they were written they come out of fights that you're not a part of. And so, as with any fight, I remember visiting my grandparents in the nursing home. My grandmother was fit to be tied. She didn't have a lot of patience. He had a world of patience. She had none. She was fit to be tied because he had a little bit of dementia. He was leaving dirty socks around the apartment. Drove her. Why can't he pick up his socks? The rest of the family was sitting here like, you know, Grandma, take it easy on Grandpa. You know, he's got some dementia. Socks were driving her crazy. So, in some ways, some of those fights are in this. And so, when you hear some hard words, it might be good to back off a little and realize these hard words come out of fights that are hundreds of years old and not terribly germane to any of our situation. Which is why in this covenant of office bearers, we, in a sense, pledge allegiance to these documents, but part of what we assert is that the doctrines in these documents we may not agree with how these things are worded. That's wiggle room. Now, churches have lots of ways of having some wiggle room. And sometimes people, especially in the context of a fight, say, we're going to get rid of all wiggle room. And that's, then you have things happen like a little boy does this, and, at school says bang. And someone says, we have a zero gun tolerance policy. And so, well, what are you going to do? Cut off the kid's fingers? He's a boy. A little context here. Do we want guns in school? No. Is this a gun? No. Does it represent a gun? Yeah. You're going to have to talk about it. So there's stuff in these documents that you're going to have to talk about. And when you sign the thing, you do not say, this is all worded the way I would. No, because some of this stuff is hundreds of years old. Well, why don't we change it? Well, sometimes we tinker with it, but part of the problem we have, if the Christian Reformed Church decides to change elements of the Heidelberg Catechism, we then move away from these other churches, like the Reformed Church of America, like the Reformed Church in South Africa, like all of these other churches, we move away from them. So these documents, these three confessions, have kind of remained static. And there's a benefit to that, and there's a problem to that. And so what the Christian Reformed Church lately has been doing is saying, we're going to write some new documents that reflect our context today. We're not going to consider them on this level because we don't really have ecumenical ties around them, but we're going to use this to talk about our faith amongst ourselves. And that's where, you can find it in this document, Our World Belongs to God, a confession, a contemporary testimony. That's where that comes in. And if you read that document, most of you will read that document and say, oh, that's a lot better than this. Well, that's because it's only 40 or 50 years old. And it's written for our context. And then you get into the Belhar. Now, many of you maybe have heard about the Belhar or haven't heard about the Belhar. The Christian Reformed Church is currently trying to process the Belhar and figure out what to do with it. And so what they recently did is say, we're going to have a category called Contemporary Testimony, which used to be the name of one document. Now we're going to use it and put the Belhar in there. So we can have... The Belhar is a document that came out of South Africa with respect to apartheid and race. And some people in the Christian Reformed Church would like to see the Christian Reformed Church adopted as a confession. The difficulty with that is confessions are very significant documents for a denomination, and ideally you're going to want to embrace it wholeheartedly by a majority of your people. The Christian Reformed Church wasn't quite ready to do that with that document. And so, but they didn't want to say no to the document, and so the church has been struggling with it, and so they've kind of put it here now. And this is a live conversation, and there's conflict, and there's stress, and there's anger, and there's all kinds of things that go on with that. But that's how churches work.
Yeah, well, let's get into that. I wonder if the last half hour can transition, because this has been an amazing foundation and frame to now say, what are our questions? And and I would propose, if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Questions that maybe came out of either what Paul just said, or some stuff that you read in the readings, or stuff we haven't even talked about yet. So just to allow for some, if you came with stuff of like, what is an elder?